Welcome to Bright Politics, where we prepare you for your next political conversation. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus. We're political science professors here at the University of Houston. Big week this week. Yet again, here we are. It's another shutdown, Jeronimo.
Another one.
Give me details about how this is going down.
It's not going well.
Not surprising. Okay.
So basically, the whole thing's still impasse. There's no middle ground to get into an agreement. And the Democrats want ICE to wear cameras, the issue of the face mask, how to identify them, so on and so forth.
ID requirements, yes.
Republicans, on the other hand, said, no, we cannot do that. Then CBP and ICE official says we don't have money to buy more than 10,000 cameras. Apparently, they only have 3,000, and they have 13,000 ICE agents.
Yeah.
So they don't have money. So Democrats then ask, but we just gave you like 75 million billion.
The big, beautiful bill has got a huge bump for DHS.
Where is it? Like, what happened to that money? So
these cameras are cheap. Just go on Amazon, like Amazon Prime Day, like pick them up.
Exactly. Give me 5,000.
Give me 5,000 of these,
So that's where we are. So no one knows what's going to happen. And then obviously they're pushing for a 2-week continuing resolution.
Yeah.
So DHS and especially FEMA, TSA, and the Coast Guard are not affected by these potential shutdown.
Yeah, this is a shutdown that will have less pain than a normal full-scale shutdown because of the way that the budgeting works for DHS, so that basically TSA screeners won't miss paychecks until March. You've got billions of dollars remaining in FEMA's bank account, so they can fund disaster issues if they need to. About 40% of funding for ICE is untouched by this lapse because they're essential employees. So there are a lot of things that basically are kind of baked into the budget cake that won't be affected immediately. But in the longer term, this could be a problem. Do you think this is an issue that Donald Trump basically put in the Republicans' lap and said, you fix it, without the possibility of this being a solution that could come about in an election year?
I mean, I don't know. Someone needs to fix it. I think that if the president intervenes more directly, then he's going to own it.
Well, true. And honestly, too, we know from a lot of scholarship that when presidents get involved in the legislative process, it makes it much more polarizing.
Right.
And that's exactly the opposite of what's needed in this case.
Exactly.
So that's a good point.
We'll
this divide is definitely problematic. I mean, the negotiations were ongoing, I think, in good faith. The Democrats basically said, not heck no, but no.
Right.
So they're still kind of figuring out exactly what that's going to look like. And I think that can be a pathway to some kind of a continuing resolution, which frankly everybody wants. So there's going to be some compromise here, but how long it lasts, we don't know. But like we said, there's a bit of a cushion here where it's possible. Who comes out better at the end of this? I mean, Republicans don't want to get jammed on this issue, which frankly, I think the president has put them in this tough spot.
Yeah.
They know they can win on immigration issues, especially being tougher on immigration, but how tough is the line?
That's
the
problem
they're facing.
Yes.
Yeah, they've gone far enough, and I think in some cases too far for a lot of voters who say, you have to pull back. So the Democrats are in a slightly better position here, I think, than they even were in the last shutdown, which, as you recall, feels like a million years ago, but it wasn't that long ago.
Well, the issue, I think, is when you're thinking about, first of all, immigrations, yes, I think the general public agrees that ICE has gone too far on the one hand. Then, on the other hand, I think that the big problem for Republicans is that the normal asks from the Democrats, not like abolish ICE, because that's never going to happen, are things that everyone can say, okay.
Yeah, this seems reasonable.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? And especially the way that they're framing it is like every single police department in the country does this.
Yeah.
So why they're not doing that?
Yeah, it's a good point.
So that's the main issue, and there we are.
Yeah, there we are. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll watch that as it unfolds slowly, as usual.
Of course.
But let's talk about international issues, because the president has made all kinds of claims this week. First of all, he's fighting with the Swiss, who are like the nicest people on the planet.
Yes.
He said that potentially China might try to shut down Canadian hockey. I tell you this, my friend, there are only two things Canadians love. That's beer and hockey. Don't mess with their hockey.
And the maple syrup.
Maple syrup, a distant third, but still delicious. Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
And then to start, the president basically is going to take a hit here in Congress, where the House is set to rebuke him and his signature economic policy on tariffs. This is interesting because, like, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has fought to try to keep the line here and has failed. Basically, you've got 3 members of the Republican Party, because of a very small majority, have been able to cross and vote with Democrats to have a resolution saying that the Canadian tariffs that President Trump put into place were unneeded. And that's obviously a political blow for the president, but also it is a kind of indication that there's a kind of lame duck status sitting in, right? Quack, quack, here comes the lame duck. And for a long time, President Trump felt like impenetrable on this. And then, the Republicans lined up behind him on everything. But now I think you're seeing a bit of a different kind of tactic here. But Mike Johnson is also unable to kind of control the House, right? Speakers typically have a lot of top-down power. In this case, he's losing not a lot of votes, but enough that it's essentially going to cut against the president's economic agenda. So how do you think this is going to play out in the general scheme of the discussion about how the economy is going to affect the midterms?
Well, the economy is going to have a huge effect, and it's going to be the effect, right? It's going to be the most important topic in which voters basically base their voting decision. And the issue is that the promises that President Trump made in the campaign were very clear, very loud, and very simple. So it was not like we're going to reduce the super deficit whatever. No.
Right, like reading from an economics textbook about supply and demand and trade
the
imbalances.
Elasticity of,
I would love to see him go in that direction.
Sure.
Let's hear it.
So it's what we've been talking, in this program is just, when you go to the supermarket, prices are going to go down immediately. And that has not happened.
Simply put, the kind of pocketbooks are really what people are thinking about, right? This is a pocketbook election. And the fact that you are seeing economic reports that the tariffs are costing people, households, about $1,000 is a blow. That plus it's hard to get insurance. That plus the rising cost of taxation in some places, including Texas. Certainly the ledge is trying to get on top of that. Plus you've got rising prices, like you say, eggs and beef are still pretty high. These are all things that are putting pressure on Americans. And it's a challenge for a White House to try to talk their way out of it. And now you've got Republicans crossing over to say, we think you're doing this wrong. So all of this together, I think, is a real blow.
Because they need to be reelected, right? And they say, well, the ship might be sinking. Let's jump ship.
They hear a quacking duck is what I'm saying. Like they think the president has basically kind of run his course, right? And certainly after the midterms, you're going to see his support fall off greatly.
And when you compare the economy with this administration and where we were in the last administration, President Biden and President Trump are in the same position. The macroeconomy, aka the Wall Street, whatever, was doing fantastic, right? But then the pocketbook, the kitchen table economics, not so great. And that's what happened in that in the last year and a half of the Biden administration. So
yes, no, it's repeating itself in a way that I think Republicans are starting to pressure, see the pressure and starting to panic. Even the small things like the president promised to be the crypto president and crypto is done. Don't even look at your crypto.
I don't have crypto.
You know what? You're smart. You're a Luddite. You don't want to have any. You don't want to have any.
I mean, I tried to buy it, but I couldn't understand how.
Well, that's perfect because if you held it, it's like half the value that it was. And so for most people, it doesn't make a huge difference. But there are some people who are invested in this, and he promised to make this better, and it isn't getting better. So I think that the kind of bloom is off the rose on a lot of these economic stories. And what's more, the Democrats are kind of empowered now. Now that this is going to pass, it's going to give them the opportunity to talk about all the other tariffs and all the other places the president is putting tariffs on and just basically hammer the president with these resolutions, forcing Republicans to take hard votes, and then ultimately really gumming up the works in the House because the more of these resolutions they have to work through and the more Mike Johnson has to kind of whip votes to make sure that they don't lose that the more it's likely that it's going to jam up things and minimize the ability for them to pass much of anything else. So it is a kind of conundrum here for the White House. But they're really doing this in a kind of unforced error sort of way, right? You know that I'm a tennis fan, and the worst thing you can do is an unforced error. It's a mistake you make on your own.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
In a situation where you could have hit something different or done a better job.
Right.
An unforced error is exactly what's happening. So the president basically this week said that he was putting additional emergency sanctions on Switzerland because he didn't like the tone of the way that the Switzerland president was talking to him. This is undercutting his issue when it comes to whether or not there needs to be an emergency and what that emergency dictates, right? The tone of a foreign leader in discussion is not an emergency. And so the Supreme Court still has to decide whether this is a sufficient and reasonable emergency power. And realistically, the president is undercutting his own legal argument on this. So it's becoming a real conundrum. Plus, these posts, Jeronimo, like he's basically threatening Canada that says, if you do this trade deal with China, then you're going to have the fallout that's going to include the loss of hockey, that the Chinese will stop hockey in Canada. And that means no more Stanley Cup, which of course affects the U.S. too. What's going on?
I don't think that they would stop hockey.
I can't imagine. Of course they wouldn't. Like,
oh, okay. I mean,
no,
because it's...
how could you even make that claim? That's the whole kind of question mark, right?
Okay, next topic.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it's like, that's what I mean is like, the Republicans are, I'm sure, just frustrated by this. Like, there are issues they can win on.
I mean, they see the midterm in a couple of months.
Yes.
And they don't see any real advance. And you cannot make the same argument and promises over and over and over and say, this is great, this is working fantastic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. While Republicans that may be more on the ground say like, nope, it is not.
Totally. And let's bring it to Texas and talk about that very issue, because Donald Trump is still not endorsed in the Texas Senate race. He probably won't, it sounds like, before the primary runoff. And so we'll see how that plays out. But let's get into some of those details. Let's talk about Jasmine Crockett first. There's been a lot of discussion this week in person and online, especially online, about like who's a better candidate, right? People mostly from outside of Texas like making comments about who they think a better candidate is. So that's become very contentious inside the Democratic Party. And so a lot of people look at this and say like, a lot of these people are running a kind of protection racket. Basically, they're saying, I'll be on your team. I'll support you virtually through my social media account if you pay me money. And so there's this kind of new information world where advertising is not like on a digital scale or on television, but rather through these influencers who've got, millions of followers. And so that is really a kind of stunning revelation. And so a lot of what's happening is ginned up by this discussion. Then the question is sort of how to best reach them. And they're taking different tacks. So Jasmine Crockett has an ad out this week that people accuse her of using AI exclusively. That is, it's not using real Texas voters. It's using like, AI people. And they know this in part because they say that there's like a stamp on it, like a digital stamp that Google uses to basically indicate that these things are created by AI. The ad spending is increasing, not surprisingly. We're just a few days away from early voting and then a few weeks from the primary itself. Jasmine Crockett lagging behind, $1.5 million. She's buying broadcast in big media, big metros. James Talarico, though, is spending a lot more, $12 million plus. His super PAC is now spending more than John Cornyn in Texas. So what do you make of the ad war that's coming down and of Jasmine Crockett's use of AI that she says is, well, she didn't say it wasn't AI, but she did say it was like human created. So, it's still part of the, sort of normal advertising process.
I mean, it was a cartoon anime-esque,
Did you like it?
I mean, I think it's one of these issues, right? You have AI. Are you going to use AI or not AI, right? And yes, at the end of her commercial or ad or whatever, you see that she's joined with, hundreds of people, right? That I don't know in the media world if how do you coordinate that? So et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, I think it's a new way, and I think it tracks with Crockett's personality in the sense that she is going to go to the edge, right? So I think that's what it is, and when you contrast that with Talarico's ad, it's night and day, right? So I think they're playing their own way or their own credentials, presenting themselves to the public like this is what you're gonna get.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they have very different styles.
Yeah.
The ads are all good, I think, and they're
Yep.
definitely targeted towards particular groups, and so that's, I think, the whole point.
Yep.
The fact that she only has one, I think, for a lot of people is the issue. Also, this week it was reported that she doesn't have a real campaign manager. They don't have like any kind of real like campaign structure. The ad buy, obviously, like I said, is pretty modest. So there's a concern that maybe like the campaign isn't being well run. In a way, it doesn't matter because she has Trump juice, right? She can
Right.
command an audience and she
Right.
can get media coverage without having to pay for it. So that's a real plus, frankly, in any kind of race. So in some sense, it doesn't matter. But at the same time, you're going to have to run a pretty good race in Texas to beat a Republican, no matter whom it is. So that's going to definitely be in that. And if you think about this in the global sense, Senate Republicans have far outweighs what Democrats have raised. Senate Republicans have got about $370 million in the bank, and Democrats have got about $130 million. All of this is big money, but the fact that the Republicans have got 3 times the money means that they're going to be able to essentially hammer whoever the nominee is.
Yeah.
They're going to have to spend that money, though, right? And that's definitely taking money away from other places that they
Absolutely.
might have to do. We've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
But John Cornyn is doing his part to raise money. He always has. He and his allies are planning on spending about $10 million in the next 4 weeks. They're hoping to make the runoff. They probably will, but there's still some chance that Wesley Hunt could kind of creep into that second spot. So big money John, like we said last week, has raised it got $50 million in his account. Republicans are spending about $65 million on this race. So there's a lot at stake here for Republicans.
Yeah.
If Crockett wins and Paxton wins, it's going to be like a wall-to-wall ads in Texas. So
Well,
it's
yeah,
gonna be
because
pretty busy.
it's the amount of money you're spending is money that you may not have during the general election.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So all those things matter, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah, but also, Wesley Hunt is probably creeping up just enough that there's worry in the Paxton and Cornyn camp. So Ken Paxton, with just about a few weeks to go before the primary, is spending about $3 million from outside money to try to take down Wesley Hunt. They launched a new set of ads that claim that he's voted with AOC, which sometimes happens because there's a lot of votes that are unanimous. Everyone votes, so it doesn't matter. But obviously in Texas, voting with AOC is like voting with the devil.
Absolutely.
And, he's missed a lot of votes for reasons that he's definitely explained, but that Republicans are worried about. So do you think that Wesley Hunt can creep into that second spot from number 3?
I mean, yes, no. And maybe. So the issue here is that these 3 candidates have very different Republican primary constituents, right? So Wesley Hunt is going towards a very different part of the electorate than, I think, for example, Cornyn or than Paxton. So the way that they're dividing that is interesting. And again, is how many of your supporters I can take to my side.
Yeah.
And is chipping away that support one way or the other.
Yeah.
Or your support is, just stay at home.
Yeah.
Don't go out.
Don't
vote.
worry about it. Yeah. We'll take care of this one for you.
So I think that's the interesting part. No?
Yeah.
So if he can creep out, well, yes, because the issue here is that you have a battle against 3 different fronts or 2 different fronts for each candidate.
Yeah.
So you shoot over there, then the other side, then this side, then the other side, and see what happens.
Yeah. You paid attention during Ken Burns' revolution, right?
Exactly.
How warfare works is very similar to the way campaigns work, because you do have to shore up your flank and make sure you don't lose that. And that's what Paxton's doing, right? Consolidate that conservative vote, consolidate the anti-Cornyn vote, and then go forward. I think that's probably what's going to happen, but you still see Wesley Hunt kind of creeping around. So this is going to be maybe tighter for that second runoff spot than we think. So we'll see how it plays out. Let's talk about some more practical issues on the ground, and that's about how unions function in Texas. This week we had dueling unions endorsing candidates for governor. Greg Abbott has 8 different Houston-area unions that supported him, and Gina Hinojosa got the vote of support of the Texas AFL-CIO. They're both saying they're the candidate that's going to be the better candidate for unions. What do you make of this?
It's it's an
all
interesting
talk.
I mean,
Or is it real?
I mean, I think it's when you mention unions, people think that unions is a homogeneous movement.
Like they're all going to vote the same way.
And labor is not like that,
Right.
no? And I think this is very clear. You have, very important unions endorsing Abbott, the pipe fitters, local, Teamsters, but then you have AFL-CIO endorsing Hinojosa. So it's just that battle, right? And there is this alignment that you see with the national, the national leaders of these unions, right? When the Teamsters, for example, endorse President Trump. So I think that's going to be very important. Again, the big question is how many of your members you can get out of vote, right? AFL-CIO is larger in size than some of these local unions, right?
And it's statewide. Yeah, that's true.
So
this is, to me, the battle for Texas. If you can win the kind of working class vote, then you can certainly put a coalition together that's successful. We saw this in Senate District 9. We talked about this last week, right? That's a successful kind of arrangement where Democrats can do well. The problem is that the percentage of people unionized in Texas has been dropping since the 1950s, right? Texas became a right-to-work state in 1947, and since then, basically, union rates have dropped. They've dropped all over the country, in part because of these kinds of laws, but you definitely see, I think, a really small percentage, like 4% in Texas are unionized compared to even like 9% nationally. So there's really low percentage. Now that number is growing in Texas, but it's not growing fast enough that Democrats can count on that the way that they did in the 20s all the way through the 1950s, and then it started to drop. So that's a coalition Democrats would really like to have back. So the support from the AFL-CIO for Hinojosa is a good sign for them. The support for Greg Abbott here locally is not a good sign. And I think that contested battle is going to be a big question here when it comes to kind of who's going to be better off to represent union. Let's talk about some legal cases. I know this is your favorite thing to talk about as a budding attorney and sometimes speculator about the legal side of things.
Of course.
Let's kick this into your
Esquire.
Jeronimo Esquire.
Yeah, I want to go to law school just to have like Jeronimo the Esquire.
Just to say it, yeah.
Esquire.
And just, kind of
put a ring, like a little ring on the pinky.
That would look good, yeah. I think you have to get one of these now.
I'm gonna bring next show. I'll bring
a pinky ring.
A pinky ring.
Okay, I like it. And open up a law firm. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm excited about this because then you can tell us more about what's happening here in this case.
All right.
This week, a federal district court struck down Senate Bill 13 from 2021. This is a law that restricts state investment in financial firms deemed to be boycotting the fossil fuel industry.
Right.
The ruling was that it's unconstitutional. Specifically, it was factually overbroad. Essentially, it violated the First and 14th Amendment. That is that these groups that, are restricted in terms of how they can invest money were having their rights limited. So the fact that there's not kind of a real business purpose here was the reason that the judge indicated this was too obscure. What do you make of the finding here?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting because this has very important implications for what is the environmental and social governance of
the ESG.
Of these corporations, right? And also how Texas regulate these institutions. Yeah. So once again, we enter in this very substantive issue in the sense of, are we really working on this capitalist market economy in which these corporations have a fiduciary duty, right, to maximize the profits of their stakeholders. Yeah. And if the stakeholders want to invest on this or not invest in that, well, that's their I mean, and what is the role of the government?
That's the point.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's the concern here. And, certainly public pensions now are going to be more routed towards the financial considerations instead of these extra political considerations. And it puts these anti-ESG laws in Texas, especially on shakier legal ground. So we'll definitely see this fight out. So we'll know, how that shakes given that this will be appealed, but it definitely has some effects on the rest of legislation that has other kinds of connections to this ESG laws, for instance, like anti-Israel. Last thing to talk about. out is while we were watching the Super Bowl, an old clip of Jean Wu was making its rounds on social media. People were getting mad about the things that he said, but it turns out he actually didn't say what they say that he said. So this is a clip of an interview that he gave that basically talked about how Democrats needed to come together and unify on things. It was perceived then to be a sort of sense of how there's this anti-white and is going to be this kind of conflict with respect to race, because he says that basically some people here in Texas share the same oppressor. What do you make of the outcome on this? It became very heated, including one of the candidates for Attorney General saying that Jean Wu should be denaturalized.
Yeah, I mean...
That can't happen, by the way. Now, AG can do that, so yeah.
Right.
That's one thing, but what do you make of the politics of this?
I mean, once again, everything is polarized, politically polarized, and one side says outrageous things, and that side doesn't say anything. Yeah. But when the other side says outrageous things, that side doesn't say anything. But the other side is like, this is terrible. We should do this, X, Y, Z. So everyone is looking at politics and what's going on with their own set of sunglasses.
Yeah. And misinformation is rampant, right?
Oh, yes.
Like this, obviously, he didn't say what they say he said, but you see the little caption, it looks like he does. So the outrage machine is definitely in full effect. I mean, we're in an election. Absolutely. What else do we expect? But I think there's a problem here where it could turn off voters who otherwise might want to participate in this. Right. And, it's a detriment potentially to Republicans who see this and say, yeah, this is kind of where we are. And Democrats say, mm-mm.
Yeah, and on that note, it's very important to check your sources. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus. The conversation keeps up next week.